Hi everyone, Diana Rankin here with your weekly psychic soul messages and predictions. And last week I said it was the 20th week of the year. I was off by a week. It was the 19th. This is the 20th week of the year. It is May 12th to the 18th. And I welcome you. I want to thank each and every one of you for the comments you make. It keeps me making these videos because, quite frankly, sometimes it's like, I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to think about it. I don't have time to do the electronics. And so thank you. I appreciate knowing that the words that come through me are helpful to you. We are going to get a message from Philip, my spirit guide. And each page has a different message on it, as many of you know. And so we'll get a wisdom from that later. Excuse me. I'm still getting my voice back. I was ill for a week or so, and that's unusual for me, so I'm not the best patient in the world, but I'm all well now. I just don't fully have my voice back. We're also going to get another way of bringing joy into our lives. This is another one of my books, and it's 52 practices, one each week, to help us bring joy into our life. And I picked one out earlier. This is let me see here. We'll get this in a minute. This is week 30th, the 30th week in the book. And it talks about treating yourself, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes too. We're also going to talk about impeachment today, why or why not. But first, I want to talk to you about love because I'm getting some feedback here from people out in the community that love isn't working. And that just says to me, you know, I don't think we're quite understanding what love is. We think, especially here in the U.S., not everyone in the world sees love the way we do, although it's moving in that direction more and more. But love is an action verb. It's not just an emotion that is namby-pamby. It's a very powerful emotion. And I want to talk to you about the power of that emotion and what it has to do with impeachment. Okay, here we go. You know, clients come to me, my private clients come to me every day with relationship issues, with work issues, and we have to work those through. And there's some commonality in all of those. And by the way, if you'd like to become a private client of mine as a coaching sessions or for an hour-long reading, information is below. Just contact me through the website. Okay, back to when clients come to me, they're just part of the general population. And as human beings, we tend to complain about what's wrong and not always work in love to fix it. So our first inclination seems to be, oh gosh, what she did, what he did, what they're doing. Oy, they, okay. So we complain. That's our normal, seems to be too much of our normal. But you know what? That does not get us what we want. Just sitting around complaining about it. Or we're fearful of it, or we're angry about it. That does not get us what we want. So let's say, for example, and here's what my clients and I do. We work together to find the solutions and ways to implement those solutions. We work through love. Example. It's very common that when I talk to a client and really get down to the nitty-gritty, beneath the anger, beneath the fear, beneath the hurt, beneath the pain, what the client really wants is to feel loved from their partner. That's what we all want, isn't it? To feel loved. Well, we have two choices here. We can complain about not feeling loved and push ourselves further away from our spouse or partner and push ourselves further away from feeling loved. Or we can find a solution. Now, what happens when we're complaining usually is a couple of things. One, we're letting go of our power. we're expecting the other one to read our mind. And that's really hard to do if we don't know what we want to start with. So let's look at all of this. Okay. A simple solution when we're having a problem with our spouse or partner or friend or even a child. It's a little bit different being a parent with a child. We're talking adult to adult here. But the simple solution is to love ourselves enough to get to know ourselves and get to know what we want, and then be able to communicate that in a loving manner. So let's say our goal is to feel loved. Okay. Gosh, my shoulder's hurting. And if I think, that if I go to my partner and I say, I don't feel loved, you don't make me feel loved, that's pretty vague and has no meaning with the partner. And he's probably saying, well, what do you expect? We end up in a fight. But if I go to him and I say to him, I'd really love it if you would rub my shoulder. That would make me feel so good. It's a little sore. And thank you. And suddenly I'm feeling loved, aren't I? Because I've loved myself enough to know what I need. I've loved myself enough to ask for it. And I've loved myself, this is a big one, enough to receive it in love. Find the solution. Asking for what we want in a loving manner will get us to our goal, which is feeling loved, a lot faster than sitting around in anger, complaining about not getting what we want. Same principle applies on the job. Let's look at that. We can either talk to the boss and complain about what's going on. We have this problem and you're not fixing it. Well, okay. Or we can go to the boss and say, there's this situation and here's the solution. Which do you think works better? Going and complaining or going with the solution? When you go and complain, you're just really giving your power away to the boss and saying, fix it. When you go with the solution, you're standing in your power. And you're saying, I know how to fix it. And you're doing that in a loving way. Which do you think is going to get you the promotion? Okay. Whether it's in our personal life, our work life, or in the politics of the U.S. today, acting in fear will not get us what we want. Acting in anger will not get us what we want. Yelling and screaming at each other will not get us what we want. I just read an article last night about, I think it might have been the doctor, I'm sorry, I don't remember who was saying this, but they were saying that advocates at a Planned Parenthood facility, there were people who were anti-abortion over here protesting, and then there were people who were protesting against those protesters who were on the opposite side. And the poor woman who has to walk through these two lines of protesters yelling at each other is just as frightened from one side as she is from the other, because they're just clashing with each other, and she's feeling that fear, and she's already in a place of fear anyway. It doesn't help when we're just yelling at each other. So what do we have to do? We have to stop spending so much time yelling at each other and being angry with each other and looking at what's wrong, and start concentrating on creating solutions. Complaining about what's wrong is coming from a place of fear. It's coming from a place of anger, a place of feeling helpless, which means you've given your power away. Working towards solution is coming from a place of standing in our power, which is coming from a place of love. Simple acts of love are very, very powerful. Let me tell you a story. This goes back to when I was teaching at the university. I was an adjunct faculty, and usually I taught in the adult school. So I had supposedly grown-ups. This happened to be a class of traditional students, so they were 18 to 20, 21 years old. It was a speech class, and one of the students came in, and he gave a speech about safety, I believe it was. I'm not sure what the speech was about. I honestly don't remember. But he had a gun. Now, I want you to know this was after Columbine, but well before Sandy Hook or Parkland, or God forbid, the other schools that are having children shoot each other. Excuse me. Okay. I looked at my class. My first reaction is I was stunned. And I looked at him and I looked at my class. Now, all this is taking place in a matter of seconds, maybe minutes. I honestly don't remember. It's been several years. And I saw some people in the class, they were fine with it. And later when we talked about it, they were. But they were the kids who grew up primarily in the country. They had no fear of guns. They actually shot guns. Many of them were hunters themselves. And they never felt that the young man was possessing, trying to harm them. Other students who were from the inner city and not from the small university town, I could feel their fear. I could see their fear. This is where my intuition kicked in. And I had to make quick decisions. And I had to make right decisions. And what I'm about to tell you is, please, this is not advocating that any teacher do what I did. What I did was walk up to the student, who, I'm 5'2", he was probably 6'4", he was much taller than me, and he was a big kid, so he outweighed me. I'm kind of a small person, a small woman, and he outweighed me by quite a bit. But I said a quick prayer. I knew my angels were with me. I knew my students were safe. I did not walk up to him in anger. I did not walk up to him in fear and demand he give me the gun. I walked up to him in full love and my full power. And I put my hand out. I looked him in the eye while another part of me is praying and asking my angels to keep my kids, my students, and me safe. And I said, give me the gun. Of course, he balked at that. I repeated it. Again, looking him eye to eye with my hand out. Give me the gun. Again, I say, I am not advocating anyone do this. I knew I was safe. There was no question in my mind. I knew my students were safe. I knew that this young man had no intention of harming anybody. I was certain about that. So I felt safe to take his gun. But I did it in such a space of love, not anger, not stomping my foot, not fear, just a place of pure love. And he gave me the gun. I walked out of my classroom, and fortunately there were a couple of coaches standing down the hall, and I'm holding this gun kind of like this with just a couple of fingers, and their eyes got really big when they saw this gun, and I said, please, someone come take this, fellas, and take it to security. Well, they came up. What happened? I said, a student brought it to class. He means no harm. It doesn't belong in a classroom. Would someone please take it to security? And one of the coaches asked, are you okay? And I said, I'm not sure. I went back in the classroom. And I did not ask the young man to leave because I wanted him to be part of our discussion. And we talked about it. We talked about the inappropriateness of having a gun in the classroom. We talked about how some students felt fine with it and I shouldn't have taken his gun, whereas other students said, yes, I'm glad you did because it scared me. Well, as it turns out, the young man was a part-time security guard on campus, and I believe, if I'm remembering correctly and have the facts correct, his father was also a full-time security guard. So again, I was certain that the young man meant no harm. But when I talk about love, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about sitting around doing nothing. I'm talking about being able to act from a place of love. What happened to the young man? I think he was suspended for a couple of days. Again, this was way back when Columbine had already taken place, but we never thought this would be an ongoing, horrific problem in the U.S. where children go to school. Since then, and because of that incident and others, I began, in addition to my private clients and workshops for the public, I also give what I call instinct seminars for service and safety, and I give these to educators. School districts will bring me in to help give educators a way to develop their instinct, so we can catch those kids before they bring the guns to school. And so we also would know what to do if there is a gun in school, besides taking it away or arming teachers. I also provide these instinct seminars for police officers, people in business, etc., etc. But I will tell you, the ones for educators are the closest to my heart. Imagine if just for one day, everyone stopped complaining, everyone felt safe, everyone felt loved, and we all dropped our anger and loved one another. Just imagine what life would be like. Imagine how different the U.S. would be if our current president had grown up feeling loved, feeling he was getting the attention that he needed, but he didn't. So we have a president that acts more like a dictator than the president of a free nation. But impeachment isn't going to take place. Not this week. Not next week. And Mueller is not going to testify this week, probably not next week. Let's think about impeachment for a minute. Nixon was well into his second term, or not well into his second term, but Nixon was into a second term before he was impeached, even though the public knew about the Watergate break-ins. Excuse me. We knew about that before the election, but Nixon was still reelected. Spiro Agnew was Nixon's VP, the first term and at the beginning of the second term. Gerald Ford came in later. Now, at the beginning of that second term, Agnew was being investigated by the U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland on suspicions of criminal conspiracy, bribery, extortion, and tax fraud. And I think he finally did a plea deal pleaded guilty to tax fraud, and I don't think he went to prison, but he resigned. He was no longer VP. Had Nixon been impeached before Agnew, Agnew would have been president. And Nixon, by the way, resigned. I'm saying he was impeached, but he actually resigned to avoid impeachment, I believe. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a historian, so I'm trying to remember all of this so I could have a little bit of that off. Think about this. Let's look at today. If Trump is impeached today, he isn't going to suddenly resign the way Nixon did. This is going to be tied up in court for months. In the meantime, let's say the impeachment is successful, if for some reason he does go ahead and resign, which he's not going to because then he's facing possible time in prison from other courts going after him. So he has reason not to resign. So let's say by some chance, though, he does after impeachment. Who do we have as president then? I think his name is Pence. Vice President Pence. Do you really want Vice President Pence as our president? So let's say we impeach him. Again, that's not going to happen overnight. That's going to take months. You know, I'll let you do the math. I'm not a Washington insider. I don't know what's going on in the minds of those who are. But I will say we're not going to see impeachment proceedings starting now and probably not before the election. And if you ask me why are so many Republicans on board with that, well, just take a look at what's happening to the federal judiciary. That we're losing that balance of judges that are more in the middle, and we're going to judges that are more on the right. The same's happened with the Supreme Court. Let's take a look at women's rights. Women are losing their rights right and left. At the same time, women are standing up for their rights. We have more and more. Look at where the money's going. Look at the human rights of each human being. They're being eroded. We can recognize how mean it's going to get, how upsetting it could get. We could recognize how close we are to World War III or creating a nuclear war. We can look at all of that. And we can say, I can sit around and complain about it. I can stomp my feet and be angry about it. Or remember, love means standing in my own power and finding those solutions and working those solutions. So whether it's in the individual life, whether it's in the collective life, we can work for change. Not from a place of anger. It's not going to work. Not from a place of fear. That's not going to work. But from a place of love. We can find the solutions and we can work them. Means we have to feel some joy. The one I pulled out from Joy, it's called Treat Yourself. You know, we all have that inner child, and that inner child wants to be loved. That inner child wants to live in joy. So here are a couple of things that we can do to satisfy. I've got 4 things here you can do to satisfy your inner child's craving. And when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling angry, if there's a specific reason, look at that reason and try to, I mean, if you're in grief, these probably aren't going to work for you if you're grieving the loss of someone. But I'm talking about our everyday lives where we just get into a rut or we get into forgetting to treat ourselves. So I want you, first of all, to be careful with those impulse treats, what sounds good in the moment, such as buying a new sofa or a new pair of shoes or that ice cream sundae may not feel so good the next day. So be careful with impulse treats. When you want to buy an impulse treat, take a moment, take a breath, and ask yourself how this is going to feel tomorrow. Now treat yourself before you feel down. Once we're down, it's harder to use that treat to make us feel better. But write down, make a list of make a list of 10 to 12 treats, and then when you feel yourself starting to get a little bit down, use one of those treats to make yourself feel better. Treat yourself with a reward for work well done. For example, after finishing a project, I like to take a nice hot bath. I may go for a massage. That's one of my treats. Or sometimes I just curl up with a book or a good movie. Those are some of the treats I like to enjoy. Other times, I just might read your comments. Thank you. Let's see what Philip has to say. Think left page, right page. And then we just flip through until we come to a page. And I'm hearing left, but I'll tell you what's on the right page as well. Interesting. Life is not a game of chance. Life is a game of law and order. It is up to you to learn the law, and the order will follow. Life is not a game of chance. Life is a game of law and order. It is up to you to learn the law, and the order will follow. A lot about what we talked today. Imagine that. On the right, it says, you can be who you want to be. But first, you have to know who you want to be. You can be who you want to be. But first, you have to know who you want to be. Oh, my friends, let's be joyful. Let's march, write letters, make phone calls, whatever you're called to do. But do it with love. Do it with love. Thank you for loving me, my friends. Thank you for the love that you add to the world. And thank you for receiving the love I'm sending to each and every one of you. Until next week. By the way, Daisy's fine. She just wasn't in the office today. So thank you.